Good morning, everyone. This is Matthew Lyman, the host of the Landlord Advocates. As we all know, today is election day. It is a day that we housing providers can change the direction of New York State. That must be done. As we have seen over the last 4 years, the party in power has enacted much laws, oppressive laws on housing providers, and there's pending legislation that will add to that oppression. Let's look at it for a few. In April of 2019, under the Human Rights Law, it became unlawful to say no to those on Section 8, the Department of Social Services, as you all know, is welfare. You can no longer say no to those programs because they call it lawful source of income. We do not call it a lawful source of income when the tenant is having their rent paid for or all of it paid for by taxpayers. That was in April of 2019. In June of 2019, June 14th, then Governor Andrew Cuomo signed into law the New York State the New York State Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019. Many aspects of that almost 75-page document are highly oppressive to housing providers. We already know all of them, but we're going to name just 3. A tenant that has been on the property for less than a year gets to be given a 30-day notice to move out. Less than 2 years, a 2-month notice to move. More than 2 years, a 90-day notice to move out. We don't understand why the difference in time frame. If you've been there less than a year, you have 30 days to find a new place, which we know is really 3 months in New York. More than a year, you have 2 months, which we know is more like 3 and 4. And if you've been there more than 2 years, we know that that's more like 4 and 5 months to find a new place to live. What is the difference between 1 month of giving them a 30-day notice and 2 years of giving them a 90-day notice? They still have to find a place to live. They still have to make a phone call or send a message to a prospective landlord. We also know that came out in June of 2019 was that you place a tenant and that tenant can move in other other occupants into the dwelling without your permission and your knowledge and your vetting of these occupants. And then when you try to acquire their names, you may never be able to do so. And then when you're going to remove them from the property lawfully through the eviction process, you have to have all of their names on the document. And without all their names on the document, they do not get evicted. How is this fair? This came from the party that's in charge of New York State government. Then, as we have seen over the last few years, with the COVID emergency I have a call, but the COVID Emergency Eviction and Foreclosure Prevention Act, where all they have to do is sign a declaration of hardship and nothing can happen to them. They cannot get thrown out. They can stay there. And then we had this disastrous emergency rental assistance program when we have seen tenants remain on the property for a couple of years or more after they apply. You get no money and they get to stay on the property and get no rent, and you can't get them out. This is still happening to this very, very day. This very second, this is happening to landlords. We have 18 months, still no determination from ERAP, nothing. Then they have the pending legislation, good cause eviction. When we testified as an expert at the New York State Senate in January of 2022, where with good cause eviction, you can't raise the rent more than 3%, and you have to have a good reason to throw the tenant out. If the judge believes that your tenant is not doing anything wrong or that your reason isn't good enough, your case is dismissed. We said at the testimony that by virtue of being the deeded owner of the property, that should be enough for us to get the tenant out. To provide a reason And if the judge isn't happy with your reason, your case is dismissed, is totally wrong. This is such an erosion of our property rights. And more of this will happen if we do not change the balance of power in New York State today. We're going to have 4 more years of oppression if we keep the party that's in power now in New York State and we keep them there. We highly, highly encourage you today to absolutely go out and vote. And when we say vote, we mean to change the balance of power in New York State to the other party, the Republican Party. Now, yes, we know that we don't always agree with all of the positions of all of the parties. We understand that. We know that. But when it comes to housing and housing alone and housing providers and real estate, we have seen that the Republican Party has more of our values in mind. They understand our position and they adhere to our position and they want to see housing flourish in New York State. That's not going to happen with the oppressions that have been put upon all of us housing providers over the last 4 years here in New York State. So again, today, we encourage you to get out there and vote. Get out there and vote. Encourage your friends to vote. Encourage other housing providers, other landlords, those of us in the real estate industry. Encourage them to go out and vote on Roe v. today, so that by tomorrow, change will be in the air in New York State. Thank you and have a great day.